Hello, and a very warm welcome to the English Story Nook. We are so glad you have joined us today. Today, we're diving into a story about the power of words, both spoken and unspoken. Get ready to discover a moving story about a woman's journey to understand her past, heal from difficult family memories, and find her own inner strength. Before we dive in, if you enjoy our stories and want to support what we do, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and consider buying us a coffee on Ko-fi. There's a link in the description below. Every like, subscription, and small contribution helps us keep creating great content for English learners like you. Let's get started. Her apologies never arrived. The faint scent of lavender and old paper clung to the air in Dr. Haro Delgado's office, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within Elena Ortiz. She sat opposite the therapist, her hands clenched in her lap, a bundle of nerves masquerading as composure. It had taken her months to even schedule this appointment, and now, sitting in the plush armchair, the words felt lodged in her throat, heavy and unyielding. "It's the silences that are the most deafening, you know," Elena began, her voice barely a whisper. "The things that were never said, the apologies that never arrived, they echo louder than any shout." Dr. Haro Delgado, a woman whose calm demeanor was a balm to Elena's frayed nerves, simply nodded, her expression a mixture of empathy and professional curiosity. "Tell me about one of those silences, Elena." And so the story tumbled out, a torrent of memories that had been dammed up for far too long. It was the summer of her 10th year, a time that should have been filled with sunshine and scraped knees, but was instead shrouded in a penumbra of fear and confusion. Her family was visiting her grandparents, a trip that was always fraught with a low-grade tension, a simmering resentment that Elena could feel but not yet understand. Her grandfather, a man whose moods were as unpredictable as the summer storms, had a workshop in the basement, a place of both fascination and terror for Elena. It was a cluttered, dusty space filled with the smell of sawdust and turpentine, a place where he would retreat for hours on end. One afternoon, driven by a childish curiosity, Elena had snuck into the workshop, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and trepidation. She had found a small, intricately carved wooden bird, its wings outstretched in mid-flight. It was beautiful, a perfect, delicate thing, and in her childish innocence, she had picked it up, her small fingers tracing the smooth lines of the wood. That was when her grandfather had appeared, his face a thundercloud of rage. He had snatched the bird from her hand, his voice a low growl, as he accused her of trying to steal it. Elena, paralyzed with fear, had tried to explain, to stammer out an apology, but he had cut her off, his words a lash that stung more than any physical blow. He had called her a thief, a liar, a disappointment. He had told her she was worthless, a profligate child who would never amount to anything. The memory was so vivid, so visceral, that Elena could still feel the cold dread that had washed over her, the shame that had burned in her cheeks. She had fled the workshop, her grandfather's words echoing in her ears, and had run to her mother, seeking comfort, seeking solace. But her mother, instead of wrapping her in a protective embrace, had simply sighed, a weary, defeated sound. "You shouldn't have been in there, Elena," she had said, her voice devoid of warmth. "You know how your grandfather is." "And that was it," Elena said, her voice thick with unshed tears. No defense, no comfort, just a quiet acceptance of his cruelty. It was a tacit agreement that his behavior was acceptable, that my feelings were irrelevant. Dr. Haro Delgado listened patiently, her gaze unwavering. "It sounds like you were not only hurt by your grandfather's words, but also by your mother's inaction." It was a betrayal, Elena whispered. A quiet, insidious betrayal that taught me that my pain didn't matter, that my voice was insignificant. It was a lesson that was reinforced time and time again in 1,000 different ways. My parents were masters of the oblique reprimand, the subtle put-down, the backhanded compliment that left you feeling small and insignificant. As the weeks turned into months, Elena's sessions with Dr. Haro Delgado became a journey of excavation, a careful unearthing of a past that had been buried under layers of denial and self-blame. She began to see the patterns, the subtle and not-so-subtle ways in which her parents' own unresolved traumas had been passed down to her, a toxic inheritance that had shaped her life in ways she was only now beginning to understand. Her father, a man who had always seemed distant and emotionally unavailable, was a sycophant to his own father, constantly seeking his approval, a futile endeavor that had left him bitter and resentful. Her mother, a woman who had been raised to be a people-pleaser, had become a master of equivocation, always trying to keep the peace, to smooth over the rough edges of her husband's and father-in-law's personalities, even if it meant sacrificing her own daughter's emotional well-being. They were not a bad people, Elena said one afternoon, a newfound clarity in her voice. They were just broken. They were doing the best they could with the tools they had, but their toolbox was filled with hammers and saws, not with empathy and understanding. The turning point came when Elena decided to confront her mother. It was not a dramatic Hollywood-style confrontation, but a quiet, honest conversation, a tête-à-tête that was long overdue. She didn't accuse, she didn't blame, she simply told her story, her truth. Her mother listened, her face a mask of sorrow, and when Elena was finished, she simply said, "I'm sorry, Elena. I'm so, so sorry." It was not the grand, sweeping apology that Elena had always dreamed of, the one that would magically erase all the pain and hurt. It was a simple, quiet admission of fault, a mea culpa that was both heartbreaking and healing. It was not a panacea, but it was a start. "The apologies may never have arrived from my grandfather," Elena told Dr. Haro Delgado, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. "But I'm learning to live with that. I'm learning that I don't need his apology to heal. I can't change the past, but I can change the way I let it affect me. I can break the cycle. I can choose to be different." The journey was far from over, but for the first time in her life, Elena felt a sense of hope, a glimmer of light in the penumbra of her past. She was no longer the small, scared child in the dusty workshop, but a woman who was finally finding her voice, a woman who was learning to write her own story, a story of resilience, of healing, of hope. A story where the apologies may never have arrived, but where she, finally, was learning to forgive. The profligate waste of her emotional energy on waiting for an apology was over. The tacit acceptance of her family's dysfunction was a thing of the past. The oblique references to her pain were now direct and honest. She was no longer a sycophant to her family's expectations, no longer a master of equivocation. The tête-à-tête with her mother had been a turning point, a mea culpa that had set her on a new path. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The panacea she had been searching for was not in their words, but in her own. That's the end of our story for today. It was a powerful journey about finding strength and healing from the past. We would love to hear from you. What is one thing that helps you feel strong and positive? Share your thoughts in the comments. Remember to check the description box below for helpful resources to continue your practice. Thank you for spending your time with us at the English Story Nook. Keep up your amazing learning efforts, and we look forward to seeing you again for our next story. Goodbye for now.